In this video, we're going to look at an alternate technique to the one we looked at last week, the three-tone method. This is something I call the patchwork method, where people begin the painting by looking at all the individual shapes of the lights and the darks and just sort of building it piece by piece, almost like a patchwork quilt. Okay, so like last time, we're going to be working from an image. This is the image we're going to be using this time, image of a bowl. The bowl has certain features because it's a geometric shape, features that are well worth understanding, in particular the whole concept of an ellipse and how an ellipse works, and how geometric structures have what's called bilateral symmetry. So if you put a line right down the middle, you get mirror image for both sides of this object. The notion of the curves, the lowest point of the curve is in the middle, the highest point of the curve is in the middle. So all of these things are well worth understanding and knowing about, so please check out the video on geometric forms before you start this exercise. Okay, as we get started, what you're going to do is tape down your board or your paper, and again I want you to freehand the image in there. Don't worry about being too precise again, we're just going to get a rough estimate here, and every step of the painting we're going to refine it more and more. You'll notice I put this sort of central line down the middle that helps me to see both sides and the symmetry. So that I can judge, where the curve goes, a line running across the middle, the shapes of the shadows, and every single one of these things is going to be modified. Now in the patchwork technique, we actually start by going in. And like drawing, I want you to start with the darks. So you can see there's the darkest part of the shadow here, and a bit lighter here, putting the darks in up there. And as we progress through the picture, I just add more and more. So unlike the three-tone, where this might have all been, or at least the bottom section versus the ellipse, would have all been one value that we then modify with some darks and some whites. Here we're putting in the pieces. All right, and as you progress through the painting, you can see putting in a bit of the background, moving along, getting more and more information, and starting to sort of blend it together, beginning to get the light logic, the shape of the actual bowl so that we can see it. And then as you go along, you will start to modify things and change things, like the base is going to get wider, things like that. So we just take this to the next step, and you can see things are much more blended now. All right, the base has gotten just a tiny bit wider. You've got your dark here, your light here, looking at the reflection of the shadow down here. So I'm starting to go in and look at details. Now, one of the things with painting is if you're trying to paint really thin lines, like these thin white line here, the thin white line there, there's two ways to do it, the hard way and the easy way. The hard way is to paint an actual very, very thin line with a very small brush. It's much easier to paint a thicker line and then take your paint on either side of it and paint over it and just kind of squeeze the line together and make it smaller. So here you can see I put a thick line in. I could even have gone thicker with that. And then in the next slide, you'll see I've thinned it down by painting this and by painting the background. And that kind of just pushes that down just a little bit more. Same thing here, there's a thin dark line down here. So what I've done is I've put a thickish line right there. And then you'll see in the next slide, I've kind of moved up and thinned it down. So this is a painting pretty much close to finished. But if I look at it, a couple of features I want you to be aware of. This is reflected light. Notice how the bowl is light down here. It's because the light is hitting the table and bouncing back. This is a shadow that's on a curved surface, so there's a slight curve to the shadow. Look for that. Here we can see that the bowl is light on a dark background, but down here it's a little bit darker on a light background. Same thing here. The bowl is dark here and it's light on the shadow, but it's light there and dark in the shadow. All right, so look for those things. And then, depending on the lighting you're in, you might see changes of color on my paintings because they're done at different times of the day, or the camera's at a slightly different setting, or the lighting in the room's changed. Don't worry about that. But because of that lighting, you might not notice certain things. So this is fairly dark, really. If we look over here, it's a pretty light background. If you squint your eyes, it's darker here than here, but generally it's not as dark as this. So in the final stage, you see I've gone in and I've adjusted all of the lights and shadows, so it's a little bit softer. And again, you see the color change. It's because it was done slightly different time of the day. All right, so you start with pieces, you slowly build up, you add a bit here, you add a bit there, and then you start to integrate them, blend them into each other, and work with them. Now it's a different approach. No one approach is better than the others. It's entirely up to you. Most people use a combination of both. They might start with shadows here and then do some building up there. They might put a gray in the whole piece here and then lighten it and darken it. Whatever works for you. I just want you to try the two different methods.